Hey everyone, ready to dive deep with us
Always.
into something you might think is, well, pretty mundane, housing.
Mm,
But trust me, this isn't your typical real estate rundown.
nope.
We're looking at a system so revolutionary,
Hmm.
it could change how we think about building, maybe even living, period.
That's right. Our source material today is a document that really throws down the gauntlet. It lays out all the problems with conventional housing
Okay,
and proposes a specific alternative,
hit me with it.
Modular Housing Systems, or MHS.
M.H.S. Okay,
Yeah.
let's unpack this. What's so bad about the way we build houses now?
Right.
Most U.S. homes use stick framing, right? Good old wooden nails.
What? Yeah. I mean, think about it. Every time you want to renovate,
Uh,
you basically have to demolish a perfectly good structure
yeah.
that's wasteful and expensive.
True.
And have you ever tried moving a house?
Oh, don't even get me started.
It's not exactly as simple as picking up your furniture and going.
Tell me about it. My last move felt like an archaeological dig with all the layers of drywall and wiring
Yeah,
we had to deal with.
exactly. And this document argues that there's a better way,
Okay.
one that draws inspiration from the past.
Uh-huh.
Think about those classic post and beam structures,
I'm listening.
barns, temples,
Uh-huh.
some of the oldest buildings still standing today.
So like two sturdy posts holding up a beam. I can picture that.
Yeah.
But how do you build an entire house that way?
You create a framework of interconnected posts and beams.
Mm-hmm.
Incredibly strong, adaptable. Plus, if one part gets damaged,
Yeah.
you can replace it without having to tear down the whole structure.
I see what you mean. It's like a giant 3D puzzle where the pieces
Oh,
can be
yeah.
swapped out as needed.
Exactly.
But didn't this method fall out of favor for a reason?
It did, yeah. Partly because working with heavy timber
Yeah.
was labor intensive and required specialized skills.
Ah, so not exactly DIY friendly.
Right. That's where MHS comes in. It takes the elegance and strength of post and beam and brings it into the 21st century.
So it's like a modern twist on an ancient technique. Tell me more.
Imagine this. A building system that's as adaptable and repairable as a piece of furniture.
Interesting.
That's the essence of MHS. The key is it uses aluminum instead of wood or steel.
Aluminum, isn't that like for soda cans and airplanes?
It is, but it also has some incredible properties that make it ideal for construction.
Okay.
Aluminum is incredibly lightweight, yet strong.
Hmm.
And it's highly recyclable.
Hmm.
The source even claims that MHS structure can be essentially immortal.
Wait, immortal, as in it will never fall apart.
Not exactly indestructible, but think of it this way.
Okay.
Since you can easily repair or replace any part of the structure,
Uh-huh.
it can theoretically last indefinitely, and you can adapt it as your needs change. Buy rooms, reconfigure spaces.
Right.
The possibilities are endless.
Okay, now you've got my attention. So how does this aluminum magic actually work? What are the main building blocks of this system?
The document breaks it down into a few key components.
Let's hear it.
Posts, beams, cladding, roofing, and foundations.
Okay.
All these parts are designed to be easily assembled and disassembled.
Like a giant Lego set.
Kind of. Like an industrial strength Lego set.
So theoretically, even I could build an MHS house.
Maybe with a little help.
I'm not exactly known for my DIY skills.
But the point is, the system emphasizes ease of assembly
Okay,
and the use of standardized parts.
makes sense.
This makes construction faster, more efficient, and potentially more affordable.
I can already see some major upsides here.
Yeah.
But the document also mentions that roofing poses a particular challenge. Why is that?
Yeah. That's where things get tricky.
Uh-oh.
It turns out that truly modularizing a roof is surprisingly difficult.
Hmm.
Traditional roofing materials like shingles rely on gravity
Uh-huh.
and a sloped surface to shed water.
So you need a pitched roof, but that's not easy to break down into modules.
Exactly. The steeper the roof, the longer and heavier the supports need to be.
Right.
So you're caught between wanting a modular design
Yeah.
and needing to accommodate the physics of water runoff.
So what are the options? Are we stuck with leaky roofs forever?
Not necessarily. The source mentions a few workarounds, like
Okay.
using prefabricated sloped roof sections that can be repeated,
Uh-huh.
or using materials that are modular in one direction,
Okay.
but continuous in the other.
They're kind of a hybrid approach.
Yeah, exactly.
But it seems a truly adaptable modular roof remains a holy grail
Right.
in the construction world.
Seems that way.
So even with this super innovative system, there are still design hurdles to overcome.
Yeah.
But it makes you think, if they can crack the code on a truly modular roof,
Right.
what else could they do?
That's a great question, and it leads us perfectly into our next topic.
Okay.
How does MHS stack up against some of the other contenders in the sustainable building arena?
Mm.
Let's compare MHS to something like light gauge steel framing,
Okay.
which is becoming increasingly popular.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
They're both strong and relatively lightweight.
Right.
But MHS has some key advantages.
Like what? Spill the tea.
Well, for one, remember that immortal concept?
Mm-hmm.
Steel can rust,
Yeah,
even with protective coatings.
true.
But aluminum is naturally corrosion resistant.
So in terms of durability and repairability,
Right.
MHS wins hands down.
Absolutely.
But what about cost? Isn't steel usually cheaper?
It can be, yeah.
Okay,
But the steel market has been pretty unpredictable lately.
that's true.
The source points out that aluminum prices tend to be more stable,
Uh-huh.
which could make MHS a better long-term investment.
Interesting. So it's not just about the initial price tag, but also how those costs might change over time.
Exactly.
That's a smart way to think about it. And what about the environmental angle?
Sure.
We talked about how recyclable both materials are,
Yeah.
but what about the energy it takes to produce them?
That's a crucial factor. Apparently, aluminum production
Uh-huh.
requires a lot of energy up front.
Hmm.
But get this, the energy needed to recycle aluminum
Yeah.
is significantly lower than producing it from raw materials.
Oh, wow.
With steel, the difference isn't as dramatic.
So if we're talking about sustainability,
Right.
it's super important to make sure that the aluminum used in MHS comes from recycled sources.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, his initial energy savings get lost.
Exactly. And that's where we as consumers
Uh-huh.
have some power.
Mm-hmm.
We can choose to support companies
Right.
that prioritize recycled materials and sustainable practices.
Right. Voting with our wallets. Okay, so we've covered durability, cost, and environmental impact.
Right.
But I'm curious about the feel of an aluminum house.
Yeah.
Does it have any quirks?
One interesting thing the source mentions
Yeah.
is that MHS aluminum framing is designed to be incredibly rigid.
Okay.
They use a special system of bolted interlocking connections
Mm-hmm.
to withstand forces like torsion and pulling.
So no worries about the house twisting or warping under pressure.
Exactly.
That's good to know. But aesthetically speaking, I'm having trouble picturing it.
Okay.
Can you really make an aluminum house look, well, not like a giant soda can?
That's where the flexibility of the system shines.
Oh.
Remember those grooves we mentioned?
Eh.
They're designed to accept a wide variety of cladding materials.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Think wood, glass, metal panels,
Okay.
even fabric.
Wow. So many options.
You can create any look you want, from sleek and modern
Uh-huh.
to rustic and cozy.
So basically, it's a blank canvas. You can use the same underlying structure,
Right.
create a farmhouse, a minimalist loft, or
Yeah.
anything in between. That's pretty cool. But speaking of different materials, what about insulation?
Sure.
Aluminum is a metal. Doesn't it conduct heat really easily?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
The source doesn't delve deep into aluminum's insulation properties specifically, but it does emphasize that standard insulation materials
Mhm.
are used within the wall cavities.
So it's not like you're living in a metal box.
No, not at all.
Okay, good.
And remember, those cladding panels can be quite thick,
Right.
which helps create a good thermal barrier.
It's like how a thermos keeps your coffee hot,
Exactly.
even though the inner and outer layers are metal,
Right.
because there's a vacuum in between.
Exactly. Plus, MHS can accommodate various types of panels, including those with built-in insulation.
Right, like SIFs.
Exactly.
Aren't those becoming really popular in eco-friendly construction?
They are, yeah.
They're basically giant insulated panels that snap together.
Precisely. And because MHS works with all these standard materials,
Yeah.
you have a lot of options to choose from.
So it really is like a giant construction set.
It is, kind of.
But the source mentions something called T-slot framing,
Yes.
and I have no idea what that means.
Okay, imagine this. You know those Lego Technic pieces?
Yeah.
With all the holes and connectors.
Yeah, I used to spend hours building crazy contraptions with those as a kid.
Well, T-slot framing is a bit like that,
Okay,
but for grown-ups.
I like it.
It's a system commonly used in industrial settings where you need to build strong, adaptable structures.
Right.
And it turns out MHS can be integrated
Oh.
with a smaller scale version of T-slot framing.
Wait, so you could literally build custom furniture
Yeah.
or even appliances that seamlessly plug into the house.
Got it.
Right.
Imagine built-in shelves, cabinets,
Okay.
maybe even an entertainment center,
Uh-huh.
all perfectly flush with the walls
Right.
because they're using the same T-slot system.
It's amazing.
And since it's modular, you could rearrange everything as your needs change.
Whoa, that's taking customization to a whole new level.
It is.
It's like your house becomes a giant adaptable living space,
Mm-hmm.
blurring the lines between architecture and furniture.
Exactly.
And it's not just about the interior.
Right.
The source mentions that things like solar panels,
Uh-huh.
lighting systems, even flat screen TVs
Yeah.
could be integrated into the cladding using T-slots.
Exactly.
So your walls could literally generate energy.
They could.
That's amazing. Okay, back to reality for a moment.
Right.
We've been gushing over M.H.S, but let's be honest.
Sure.
Don't materials still degrade over time, even aluminum?
Of course, nothing lasts forever.
Right.
The source acknowledges that aluminum is subject to wear and tear,
Uh-huh.
just like any material.
Okay.
But that's where the modularity of M.H.S comes in.
I see.
Instead of having to demolish and rebuild an entire section of your house
Yeah,
when something needs fixing,
right.
you can simply swap out the damaged component.
So it's not about defying the laws of physics.
Right.
It's about designing for change and making repairs easy and affordable.
Exactly.
That's a pretty refreshing way to think about building.
It is, yeah.
It's a shift from the disposable mindset we've become accustomed to towards a more sustainable and adaptable approach.
Absolutely.
Right. Instead of seeing our homes as static structures,
Mm-hmm.
we start to think of them as evolving entities that we can shape and adapt over time.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to the comparison with steel framing.
Okay.
Remember we were talking about some potential downsides of steel?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned something about protective coatings and discoloration.
Right.
Remind me what that was about.
Right. So steel framing often requires oil coatings to prevent rust.
Yeah.
And these coatings can release potentially harmful chemicals into the air inside your house. Not exactly what you want to be breathing in.
That's not good. And what was the discoloration issue?
Apparently, some steel-framed houses have experienced discoloration of the interior wall sheathing, possibly due to thermal dynamics.
Oh, interesting.
It makes you wonder if there are other hidden downsides
Yeah.
to materials we consider conventional.
It's a good reminder that even seemingly familiar things
Right.
can have unexpected consequences.
Absolutely.
But how does aluminum compare in these areas?
The source emphasizes that aluminum doesn't have these same issues.
Okay.
It's naturally corrosion resistant,
Uh-huh.
so it doesn't need those potentially harmful coatings.
Right.
And it seems to be more thermally stable,
Okay.
avoiding those discoloration problems.
Okay, so aluminum scores some points there.
It does.
But we have to be honest and acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Let's hear it.
What about the environmental impact of producing aluminum in the first place?
That's a valid concern.
Right.
The source doesn't sugarcoat it.
Okay.
They admit that aluminum production requires a significant amount of energy.
Right.
However, they also highlight the high recyclability of aluminum
Uh-huh.
and the fact that recycling it uses far less energy
Right.
than producing it from raw materials.
So again, it comes back to responsible sourcing.
It does.
We as consumers need to advocate for using recycled aluminum. Yeah.
Whenever possible,
Yeah,
to minimize the environmental impact.
absolutely. And not just for building materials,
Right.
but for all sorts of products.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Let's get back to this whole MHS aftermarket concept.
Sure.
I'm still wrapping my head around the idea of buying and selling used housing components.
It's a pretty wild idea, right?
It is.
Imagine being able to upgrade your kitchen or add a bedroom
Yeah.
simply by purchasing pre-owned modules from someone who's downsizing or remodeling.
Whoa. That could make home improvement way more affordable
Right.
and sustainable.
Exactly.
Instead of ripping out perfectly good cabinets and sending them to the landfill,
Yeah,
you could give them a second life.
exactly. It's a win-win for homeowners and the environment.
But wouldn't there be logistical challenges?
Of course.
How do you ensure quality control for used components?
Right.
And how do you handle things like building codes and permits?
Those are all valid questions.
Yeah.
It would definitely require some creative problem solving.
And maybe even some changes to existing regulations.
Right.
But I think the potential benefits are so compelling that it's worth exploring.
I agree. It would be amazing if we could create a circular economy for housing where materials are constantly being reused and repurposed.
Right.
instead of ending up in landfills.
That's a powerful vision, yeah.
And one that aligns with the growing global movement towards sustainability and resource conservation.
Absolutely.
We've been focusing a lot on the positive aspects of MHS,
We have.
but are there any potential downsides or challenges we haven't considered?
Huh.
I mean, nothing is perfect.
Right. You're right. Nothing is perfect. One thing that comes to mind is the need for specialized tools and training to work with M.H.S.
Right. Yeah. It's not like grabbing a hammer and nails and going at it.
Nope.
So does that mean it's only for professional builders?
Yep.
What about us DIY enthusiasts?
That's a great point. It could limit DIY projects.
Yeah.
Unless there's a simplified version of the system
Right.
specifically designed for homeowners.
Okay.
Maybe M.H.S. could offer like different levels of complexity,
Uh-huh.
like those furniture kits that come with varying levels of assembly instructions.
That's a cool idea. So you could have a basic kit for simple projects
Right.
and a more advanced one for like the hardcore DIYers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It all comes down to clear instructions and user-friendly design.
Yeah.
Whether you're a professional builder or a weekend warrior tackling a home improvement project,
Right.
you don't want to end up with a pile of aluminum beams and no clue what to do with them.
Definitely not. But speaking of potential hurdles,
Yeah,
what about the cost factor?
sure.
The source claims MHS can be competitive with traditional methods.
Hmm.
But is that really realistic?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
Building material costs fluctuate wildly, making direct comparisons tough.
Right.
But remember how we talked about the volatility of steel prices?
I do.
Well, aluminum tends to be more stable,
Yeah.
which could give MHS a long-term cost advantage.
Right. So even if the upfront cost of MHS is slightly higher, you might save money down the road
Exactly.
because you won't have to replace rusted steel components or do as many major renovations.
Exactly. It's about thinking long-term
Right.
and factoring in things like durability and repairability.
Hmm.
It's like investing in a high-quality appliance.
Yeah.
That might cost more initially,
Uh,
but last for years with minimal repairs.
Makes sense. Okay, last logistical question. What about the availability of materials?
Sure.
Is aluminum readily accessible worldwide, or are we talking supply chain nightmares?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
Honestly, the source doesn't really address it.
Mm-hmm.
The global supply chain for aluminum is pretty complex.
Right.
So there could be regional differences in availability and cost. It's something worth researching further
Yeah.
if you're considering building with M.H.S.
It just goes to show you how interconnected everything is. Choosing one building material over another
Right.
can have ripple effects across the entire world. But let's shift gears and get back to the big picture.
Okay.
What kind of societal impact could we see if MHS became like the go-to method for construction?
That's where things get really fascinating.
Yeah.
Imagine communities where houses can easily be adapted to meet changing needs.
Uh-huh.
Families could expand or downsize their living spaces
Right.
without having to uproot their lives and move every time their circumstances change.
Right. No more frantic house hunting because you need an extra bedroom or home office.
Exactly.
And think about multi-generational living.
Oh, yeah.
Grandparents could stay close to their families while still having their own independent space.
Right.
No need for those heart-wrenching moves to assisted living facilities.
Exactly. It could create a more fluid and responsive housing market.
Yeah.
People have the power to adapt their homes to their lives
Right.
instead of the other way around.
It could also make communities more resilient,
Absolutely.
especially in the face of climate change and natural disasters.
Yeah.
After a hurricane or earthquake,
Mm-hmm.
imagine being able to quickly rebuild or reconfigure homes using readily available MHS components.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the growing need for adaptable and resilient infrastructure
Right.
in a world facing increasingly unpredictable challenges.
And what about using MHS to address homelessness?
Sure.
If we could quickly and affordably construct shelters or temporary housing
Yeah.
using modular components.
It's certainly a possibility worth exploring.
Yeah,
Of course, a safe and dignified home is about more than just four walls and a roof.
of course.
But having access to adaptable, easily deployable structures
Right.
could be a game changer in tackling the housing crisis.
It's exciting to think about how this technology
It is.
help create more equitable and resilient communities.
Absolutely.
But we've been focused on the macro level.
Right.
Let's zoom back in to the individual.
Okay.
How could MHS change the relationship between people and their homes?
That's a profound question.
Yeah.
I think it could foster a sense of ownership and empowerment.
Uh-huh.
Imagine being able to truly customize your living space
Right.
to reflect your personality and needs,
Yeah.
not just through decor, but by shaping the structure itself.
Right. It goes beyond choosing paint colors or furniture.
Mm-hmm.
You're actively involved in the design and evolution of your living space.
Yeah.
It's like a shift from a consumer mindset
Uh-huh.
to a creator mindset.
Yeah.
You're not just buying a finished product.
Right.
You're participating in an ongoing process of adaptation and improvement.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a vision of home ownership that's both empowering and sustainable.
But is there a risk of taking adaptability too far? Could this lead to a sense of impermanence or rootlessness? Could it make people feel less connected to their homes and communities?
Those are important questions.
Yeah.
And it's crucial to strike a balance between flexibility and stability.
Mhm.
Ultimately, it's up to individuals and communities
Mhm.
to decide how they want to use this technology.
Mm-hmm.
MHS is a tool,
Right.
not a solution in itself. It's what we do with it that matters.
It's like any powerful tool. It can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
It all depends on our intentions and how we choose to wield it.
Well said.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation we need to have collectively
Yeah.
as we navigate the path towards a more sustainable and adaptable future.
Okay, I have to bring up one last thing that really stuck with me from the source.
Sure.
That whole problem with the modular roof,
Yeah,
it seems like such a fundamental challenge.
it does. Yeah.
And yet it feels like something we should be able to solve.
You and me both. It's like the missing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
The source offers some workarounds,
Right.
but it's clear that a truly adaptable roofing system would require a radical departure
Yeah.
from conventional thinking.
What if, and I'm just spitballing here.
Okay.
What if instead of trying to modularize the structure of the roof, we focused on developing modular materials that could be applied to any type of roof?
That's an intriguing idea.
Yeah.
We'd need materials that are lightweight, durable, weatherproof,
Uh-huh.
and able to conform to different shapes and angles.
Imagine something like flexible solar panels
Okay?
that could be snapped together like tiles,
Yeah.
creating a weatherproof and energy-generating skin for the roof.
Right.
And because it's modular, you could easily replace damaged sections
Yeah.
or reconfigure the layout to optimize solar energy capture.
Now, that's thinking outside the box. It turns out that even with all the innovation we've discussed,
Right.
there's still plenty of room for creative problem solving and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind.
It has.
We've covered everything from the nuts and bolts of aluminum construction
Uh-huh.
to the philosophical implications of adaptable architecture.
Right.
And honestly, it's left me feeling incredibly optimistic about the future of housing.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think we're at a pivotal moment
Mm-hmm.
where we have the technology and the awareness
Right.
to create homes and communities that are truly sustainable,
Yeah.
resilient, and empowering.
Well said. And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. Do your own research, ask questions, challenge assumptions, and most importantly, imagine the possibilities. The future of housing isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
It's something we create together.
So go forth and build.
And thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.